Hello, and welcome to a new world. My name is Ebube, and you are listening to Popcorn for Dinner. I say it's a new world, but really it's a world that you're very familiar with, presuming you've watched Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. This is the world of Westeros, something that's brutal, but also beautiful, something that has lessons to teach, and something that's just a whole lot of fun to be in. We're going to be talking today about the new series from George R. R. Martin based on his Dunk and Egg series of novellas, where we follow a hedge knight who's trying to make his way in the world and his young squire. Their names are Dunk and Egg, but I'm guessing you figured that out by now. You may have heard that this show is on the way. And honestly, if you hadn't, that's totally fine, because we are here to tell you everything about what to expect from this show, what it's going to be like going in, how it's going to be different from the shows you already know, and honestly, why you should watch it. And spoiler alert, we think you should. And I know I keep saying we, but you're only hearing me. So I think now is a good time to mention that I'm joined by my good friend Soonen, who is a fellow expert of the world of Westeros. And we have a lot to tell you today, don't we, Soonen?
We sure do. Thanks for having me, Ebube. I'm super excited to be back in Westeros.
Yeah, this is I don't know. It's cool to be here in the sense that this show it feels different already, right? Like it feels like something that's going to be a little bit lighter in tone. Like looking at the trailers, you can tell that they're going for something a little bit more comic. You know, clearly it's the same place, but people aren't really worried about their inheritance as much,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term.
Same place, different vantage points is really how I would describe it.
Yeah, I mean, this show is set in the world of Westeros, like we've said, but it is kind of being viewed through the eyes of the small folk, the little people, the people who are not trying to save the world from White Walkers, the people who are not trying to make sure their brother doesn't steal a kingdom from them, the people who aren't worried about succeeding their Lord Father or becoming, I guess, a member of the Night's Watch or not, whatever the case may be. Like, these are mainly just people who are trying to survive.
Yeah.
Between now and tomorrow. They're just like, okay, how do I see the next day? How do I feed my family? Stuff like that. So we're going to see a lot of characters in this show that are asking questions like that. People who are somewhat worried about, like, okay, what do I do? How do I do it? Who do I need to make sure I avoid? Who do I need to make sure I don't annoy? Because obviously we're used to seeing people that, yes, they have problems, but those are kind of first world problems. Like they're kind of like worried about, power and the intrigue of it. Whereas these people are kind of just worried about, just surviving and living normal lives. Like, and I think we're probably going to see a lot of people who are maybe a little bit more happy and content because they don't have those first world problems. They're kind of just trying to lead an honest life for the most part. And maybe we'll see people who aren't leading an honest life.
Yeah. I think, honestly, what I'm very excited about for this is I think George R. R. Martin really shines when he's writing about the small folk.
Mm-hmm.
If you've read his writing, Game of Thrones or really the Game of Thrones series and also the Dunk and Egg novellas, he really shines when he's talking about how these big events, the Game of Thrones, the kings and their games affect
the little people.
Affect like regular people. And I think that is a vantage point that we've been missing from, HBO media set in Westeros for a while now. House of the Dragon is definitely more focused on, the royalty and their intrigue. It's a political intrigue show, which I absolutely love. Same thing with Game of Thrones, especially towards the later season, it became very top heavy, so to speak. But going back down to the salt of the earth, the regular life of Westerosi people that maybe aren't necessarily our big lords and ladies, but a hedge knight, for example. That's a
Yep.
story we haven't seen in any of the HBO media. And just to clarify what a hedge knight is, because we probably don't know, a hedge knight is a knight that is not, what we've seen so far, where you have a knight from a royal house or a lordly house in someone's employ. A hedge knight is basically almost like a ronin,
Mm-hmm.
if we
Mm-hmm.
think of it in terms of samurai, where you have samurai who are pledged to a lord.
Yeah.
A hedge knight is kind of like a wandering knight who is then able to pledge to whatever lord that they come across for either a short period of time, for a long period of time. And they're also an integral part of, the entire tapestry that makes up the political structure of this world.
Yeah. That's explained perfectly, honestly, because the idea of a hedge knight is the one of someone
Yeah.
who is striving, somebody
Yes.
who has to work for a living, right? And that's
Yes.
something that people don't really see in most Game of Thrones shows, because we come
Mhm.
across small folk, yes, and we may not think about it too much, but the people that we spend most of our time with in these shows do not work for a living. Like
That's true.
life kind of provides itself to them. Like
Yes.
everything around them is part of a system that is designed to keep them not just content but on top. So I feel like now we're going to get a glimpse of the people who make all that work, who make all that happen. And then we see, obviously we're going to be seeing some nobles, like people who are of I guess significant birth, highborn people, and we're going to
But
see
they're
how.
not the focus of this
Yeah, exactly.
story.
They're not
That's
really the
what I
focus.
love.
We're gonna see how like the small folk, the regular people, view them, how they talk about them. I think House of Dragon delves into that a little bit in its second season. When we go to some of these inns and pubs and we see how they're talking about certain people, we see like how the regular people think about the royals. And I feel like the impression here is that that's going to be the main thing, and then we'll maybe get a glimpse of what the royals and the nobles are doing, kind of as a secondary thing. And then I think those two perspectives are probably going to kind of work in tandem, maybe from a certain point in the season, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, what is your first impression having seen the trailer?
I mean, you mentioned the tone, right? There's
Yeah.
a comedic tone that I'm super excited about. As someone who's read the novellas,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of humor, and I'm excited to see that put to the screen. I'm curious to see how the actor, could I get his name again? Tom, was it Tom or Sam?
Who plays Dunk?
Yes,
Peter Claffey. Yeah.
Peter. Thank you.
Yeah, Peter
Apologies,
Claffey.
Peter, if you ever somehow listen to this.
Hi, Peter.
Um, Hi, Peter. But I'm excited to see how he approaches the role, because from the source material, it's a physical role, but the physicality is in very specific ways. You're
Mm-hmm.
playing someone of imposing stature who has basically grown up as almost not a person.
Yeah.
In this world, if you are born poor, you're almost not a person. I mean, in that world and this world, sad to say, you're almost not.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you almost are not imbued with inherent dignity just by virtue of being a human being. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of physicality that comes with that as well, and I'm excited to see how he approaches that role.
Somebody who is tall but has been taught to see himself as small. Right.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's interesting. I mean, looking at like again the tone from the trailer, listening to the voiceover, hearing his voice, it's like, okay, this is somebody who wants to make an honest living. He wants to make something of himself. He wants to move
Yes.
forward. He understands what the world is, and he wants to show that that his potential can take him somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's trying to see what levers can be pulled to achieve what he wants to achieve. So it's a question of, okay, can he achieve that? Like, what is actually doable for him? And we know that he's going to meet a bunch of interesting people, not the least of which is a certain young bald child. So that is going to be his companion. And I guess when we start watching the series, we're going to know exactly how they meet. But yeah, how do you feel about, I guess, the portrayal of the character of Egg in the trailer? Like, what was your impression when you saw him and like the actor that was going to be playing him? I know like they released some casting announcements like a long time
Yeah.
ago, but now we have a full on trailer. We have things that they're releasing to kind of count down. They have videos on YouTube that are like meet Dunk, meet Egg. It's like we're getting a sense of who these people are because they're trying to ease us back into this world in a way that tells
Absolutely.
us it's the same place but a different time.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what he brings to the role. I mean, from the trailers, trailers are designed to not give away too much.
When done
But
well, yes.
when done well. But the trailers have certainly gotten me intrigued. I think from what I'm seeing, the young boy will play comedy quite well. From the
Yeah.
little interactions he has in the trailer. And yeah, it looks like I'm definitely excited for it. Also cautiously optimistic. HBO and Westeros have had a very rocky history.
Oh my God, man. Oh my God.
Don't get me started about season 4 onwards of Game of Thrones and some of the creative liberties that were taken by the showrunners there. I'm cautiously optimistic. I have heard talk, and maybe you can confirm this, um, about George R. R. Martin being even more involved in this show than he was in House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones. And if that's the case, I hope so, because I think, his writing is really engaging.
hmm
And if it is translated accurately and faithfully to the screen, I think we might have ourselves an all-time banger here. Hopefully.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
we might be on the cusp of something great because,
I think so, yeah.
yeah, I mean, he's talked a lot about his, his I guess, favorite William Faulkner quote, this idea that the human heart in conflict with itself is the
It's the
only
only
thing
story.
worth writing about, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a fun idea because he brings that sincerity to everything that he writes.
Yes.
I can confirm, in fact, that he will be involved in this show more than he was in House of Dragon and Game of Thrones. I
Okay.
think in Game of Thrones, it was more an idea of, okay, he's trying to write a story,
Yeah.
but they're adapting it. So as a former TV writer, he's like, okay, how do I bring this to the forefront? And I think back then he used to write one episode per season.
Hmm.
Now he's not really doing that as I mean, he stopped doing that after a certain point. And then with House of the Dragon, he did go ahead and create the show, but his involvement was not as I guess deep day to day.
I mean, and not to mention, there was also a little bit of friction, on his blog, um, posting about certain things and like almost like setting the record straight about like how much deviation was occurring from the source material, especially when it came to the nature of dragons. Which makes me feel, unfortunately, that we might see some of that deviation as that show goes on. But I'm hoping that this isn't the case here.
Yeah, I mean, liberties were definitely taken in terms of House of the Dragon. I know people were a little bit iffy about season 2. All the things that it did do, all the things that it didn't do, the fact that it was shortened, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know it was an 8-episode season, but and this is something we talked about, right? When the show aired a couple of years back, this idea that the episodes themselves on some level were making sense, but then there was this whole thing of, it felt more like they were making sense as part of a 10-episode run. So when it turned out that the 8th episode
Was the
was
season
actually the
finale.
finale, it was like, okay, what's going on here? It
Yeah.
felt a little bit strange. And I think that was jarring for a lot of people. And now, they've made some decisions that, they can't really go back on. Like maybe characters that they didn't include that maybe would have had more importance in the books, but now they're not really going to have any importance at all because they're not there, right? So
Yep, exactly.
how are we going to deal with that? And I think this show, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, would not really have a problem like that. Not just because George R. R. Martin is taking a more, I guess, involved hand, but also because it doesn't have huge issues to kind of navigate in that sense. Like it's trying to do more with a little bit less. And I think that
Yes.
the story is still doing what it's supposed to do. It's still doing a lot. It's still ambitious, but it's not trying to be grandiose in its delivery too much. Like we can see that it's dealing with small matters and how smaller people view big matters.
Exactly. And there are lots of big matters that occur during this time in Westeros. And consider this a pitch from me to any Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones fans. There are things that occur in this period of time in Westeros that are that really help set the tone for what comes next. And there are things that have occurred prior to this time that we see probably the consequences of. And I think, for anyone who is a fan of Game of Thrones, House of Dragon, anyone who has read Fire and Blood should definitely be watching this show.
Yeah, 100%.
That one, 100%. Anyone curious about how did we get the world the way it was at the beginning of Game of Thrones should be watching this show. And yeah, anyone who's curious about Westerosi history should be watching this show.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of history, right, this show is set roughly 100 years before Game of Thrones starts, whereas House of Dragon is set maybe 200 years. So this is kind of like an in-between world where things, based on the trailer, things seem to be a little bit quiet, like a little bit less tense, right? Than House of the Dragon, and a little bit less foreboding than Game of Thrones. Yes. So it's like that may have something to do with the time period. It may also have something to do with the characters and the specific perspectives that we will be dealing with in this specific show. But yeah, there's a lot to kind of dive into. How do you feel about, I guess, what could come in terms of the characters? Like, are there any specific characters that you are looking forward to meeting?
Yes.
I guess, I mean, obviously, I guess we don't know who they're going to include, because we don't know exactly what they'll choose to adapt. But I guess without spoiling anything, is there anyone that we can kind of look forward to, whether it's the like Targaryens themselves or certain small folk characters whose names will be mentioned later on after the show has aired, big roles to play, people who maybe will make a big difference in the journey of Dunk and Egg?
Honestly, I would say there are no small roles in this.
Okay.
I would say there are no small roles in this. It's a very different type of story. And everyone they meet is a part of their journey. And if you like those kinds of shows where you have a wandering character trying to make their way in a world such as, say the Mandalorian and Grogu, or, any of the numerous Ronin shows, Ronin based shows or movies,
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood character in his cowboy spaghetti westerns. If you like that kind of storytelling, there's really no small roles. Everyone on the journey from the highest lord to a cook can have such an impact on our hero's journey that
Yeah.
I don't think there's any small roles. And I'm looking forward to meeting everyone. I'm certainly looking forward to meeting our, two main characters, Dunk and
Yeah.
Egg. And
Definitely.
I'm most of all looking forward to their relationship
Yeah.
because
I guess it'd be like a
it's
brotherly relationship of sorts, maybe. Like a big brother,
I
little brother, or maybe like kind of like a teacher and student relationship. Like it
exactly.
depends.
And there's certain things that also come in to complicate and deepen that relationship as well.
Okay.
That I will not reveal here.
Yeah, we definitely can't
But
reveal those things.
no, we certainly can't. But if you want to get hype for this, and if you're looking
And we
for a
do.
reason to watch it, there is a part in Game of Thrones where they refer to, the character, the main character of the show, and kind of summarize, you know, why he's an interesting character.
Yeah.
So I won't say too much about that. I recommend you go find it yourself. It's all over the internet. But I think
Yeah.
if you watch that clip, I think that'll get you interested in the show. And yeah, I think you should watch the show if you're a fan.
Essentially, yeah, like I think the clip that you're talking about, and I guess the parts of Game of Thrones where this character is mentioned, I guess they kind of do a good job of quietly letting us know that maybe he does find his way in the world somehow, right?
Yes.
He does like he goes on a journey and he gets somewhere,
And he
but we
gets
don't need to
somewhere.
we don't need to talk too much about like what that is, but I
But
think
the
we'll find.
journey is the
Yeah,
most important part. And I think
yeah,
you'll be excited and thrilled and, heartbroken and laugh and cry at this journey. It's different to anything we've seen in this world so far.
yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, in terms of, I guess the kind of the culture of Westeros, the trailer seems to show like a lot of familiar elements. Like we can see a good amount of like, jousting. We can see people kind of interacting with each other in a way that's reminiscent of the world of Game of Thrones. We can see kind of this idea of, I guess, feudalism still existing. They still have, their
Lords
their,
and
their
small
lords, and
folk.
yeah, and those relationships still drive things. So I wonder, like, as we start to see what the perspective of the little people really constitutes, it's like, okay, how do they navigate the world? Because when you don't have that much and you're surrounded by a world that's full of dangers, how does it feel when some of those dangers are literally the people around you that just happen to be born a little bit
Exactly.
luckier in the world? So yeah, I think
Exactly.
I think there's going to be a little bit of social commentary. Essentially, is what I'm getting at. There'll be social
Oh,
commentary on
100%.
yeah, from like
100%.
how these people, I guess, see each other, like where their attentions maybe, yeah, and
I
see some of the indirect things too. About economics and politics.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think, G.R.R. Martin, despite writing about a fantastical world of feudalism, I think in his writings, he does show the inherent injustice of this world
Hmm.
and how easy it is to be ground under the wheel, as Daenerys says.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
one of my most favorite ways he has done that in the text, and I think in the show as well, is there's Septon Maribald. I think he's called something else in the show, where he talks about how people become broken men. Um, about how, you know, you're a guy in a village with your buddies. The lord of your little area comes and says, "We're going to war, follow me." You are excited. You grab a stick, you know.
A stick. It's crazy.
No, honestly, it's there. You grab a stick. Because we've seen Game of Thrones, everyone has swords, but not everyone really has swords, you know?
Yeah.
Think about like a small folk. Like, you can't buy that kind of steel. You don't
muster
have
an
the money.
army. Like, people don't realize that swords don't just, first of all, they don't grow on trees.
They don't grow on trees. And not only that,
to have a sword, you have to have paid somebody who was like an actual smith to make one, which is why they're made in castles, right?
Exactly.
The people who can do that stuff.
And not every lord is on the same level. Some lords can have like huge smiths just making swords for them. Some lords are smaller and don't really have
they have smaller castles. Not everybody is the Starks of Winterfell.
Exactly. And that is what I think, you know, diving into this show based on the novels is going to really show, is that there's the small folk, there's our big lords and ladies, you know, masters of their realms, and then there's a whole ecosystem in between that. People trying to move up, you know, people dealing with each other. There's so many houses. How do those houses interact? How have prior events in Westerosi history informed how they interact with themselves and their small folk? There's just so much meat on the bone of this show, narratively and from a world building perspective, that I'm just so excited to dive into.
Yeah, me too, man. I think there's honestly so much to sink our teeth into here. I'm looking forward to, you know, also as somebody who is definitely interested in the Targaryens, I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, which Targaryens we will end up meeting at this time.
Absolutely.
Because obviously the fact that we're still seeing if this is between Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, then it tells us a few things. Number one, between Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, multiple things. The first one is Targaryens are still around. The second one is the war in House of the Dragon is ostensibly over. Actually, maybe it isn't. Actually, maybe there's still vestiges of that war that are still kind of moving along, and like there's still some tensions and conflicts that are still going on. And you know, we know that certain people don't exist yet. Like there's no one in Game of Thrones who is alive yet, I believe, except maybe one person.
That's not necessarily true.
Except maybe one person.
Except maybe one person.
Maybe two.
Literally one person.
Maybe two. Maybe like, you know, some people. I can think of a certain guy who like really likes trees, for example. But yeah, like, I mean, there may be some people, but I think that's an interesting connection, right? Because we have, it means that we have a link to both of those shows, which means we have a reference point for people who haven't read the books but maybe have watched the shows. So those people don't need to feel like they're lost. They don't need to feel like they're walking to something strange.
Or people who haven't even been in Westeros at all.
Right? You don't need to have watched the other shows. That's something important that we need to mention. You do not actually have to have watched Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon to enjoy this series.
Yes.
This is completely independent. And I would say the same for House of the Dragon. You don't need to have watched House of the Dragon to watch Game of Thrones to watch House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
You can kind of watch them in whatever order you want, because they're all telling different stories. They inform each other, but they're telling different stories.
And it's a complete, based on the books, I'd say it's definitely a complete introduction into the world of Westeros, whether or not you have that prior context.
Yes. So there are definitely going to be some events probably through the course of this series that affect certain things that we see in Game of Thrones. This season is going to be 6 episodes, I believe, which is a little bit different from a normal, House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, Westerosi show, whereas they like to do 10 episodes a season and kind of keep things tight. Though once in a while, I guess whenever they get confused about what they're doing, they do less than 10 episodes. Hopefully that's not going to be the case here, but this, I think, is going for a more comedic tone. It's going for something a bit lighter with shorter episodes. So it's going to be 6. I think they're trying to tell something that's a little bit more contained, short and sweet. It's airing.
The books are novellas, they're
exactly.
they're not very long books. So I do understand them.
It's like a series of short stories. It makes sense, right? Even the airtime, right? This is going to be airing on Sunday nights, right? After the normal 9 p.m. slot, because usually the 9 p.m. slot is where you'd be seeing something like House of Dragon and Game of Thrones. But for this season right now, that's going to industry. And this series, usually that dramatic 9 p.m. slot happens, and then right after there is, on HBO generally, there is something that starts at 10 that's a little bit lighter, 10 or 10:30, right? So this show is going to be that for this for this particular period. So while industry is going on, and they're going to be running concurrently, of course, so industry will finish an episode, and then Night of the Seven Kingdoms is going to come right after as the quote-unquote comic relief show. But obviously, because this is the Game of Thrones world, it's not going to be all fun and games forever.
It's never all sweet.
Yeah, some things are definitely going to go down, and I'm looking forward to how they handle that. Like, this is the same time slot that Insecure used to air in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that show is like, in terms of how it approaches the story and its spirit, very similar. Like, it starts as something very comedic and it stays comedic, but then there's some very dramatic moments serious, in there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's kind of a lot to expect there, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the performances are, because shows like this are always a great place for actors that are lesser known to just blow up, right?
Yes.
Everybody we know from Game of Thrones now, like, they're huge now, and we know them from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But, they started as people that we were not necessarily sure, like, oh, what is this person bringing to the table? And now there's nobody who's been on that show in a major role that, hasn't essentially been set for life in terms of, like, becoming a household name.
Absolutely.
And I think House of Dragon is doing that for some of its own people too. That's going to be an excellent springboard for a lot of people. And I think this show is going to do the same, right? Like Peter Claffey, I've seen him in a couple of things. He is actually a supporting character. He plays a supporting character on Bad Sisters, which we've also covered on this podcast. He's Irish. And I feel like with Dexter Soul Ansel, who is a literal child, like, this is kind of an amazing role to get started in, because he's basically, this is like equal billing, right? Like, he's a main character in this series at such a young age, and he's going to have a lot of options afterwards. I mean, we're seeing a lot of young actors do amazing things. Owen Cooper is winning big for his role in Adolescence, and that tells you that with the right stories, the right people can shine. Like, anyone can shine, right? Absolutely. And I think this is kind of egalitarian in that way. And I think that's fun because it reflects the spirit of this series and what it's trying to represent in the first place. Like, it's trying to show you, after presenting so much about, inheritance and legacy and that which is hereditary and noble, we're kind of juxtaposing that with that which is egalitarian, that which relies on, working hard, making your way in the world, where things are not guaranteed, right? Because it's funny, right? It reminds me of the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones, where Jon Snow was complaining about his lot in life so much, and once in a while he'd run into somebody who's like, "Are you dumb though? Like, do you not realize that if you were born literally anywhere else,
like,
just
your life
just like 2 miles outside your castle, literally anywhere else, like, your life would be completely different. Yes, you're a bastard, but, like, you're a bastard of one of the 7 most powerful people on this continent."
Yeah.
Like, he's raising you as his son. You live in a castle. You're growing up with literal, like, lords. Like, it's you don't, and obviously we got to understand later the significance of Jon Snow's birth and everything. And speaking of which, by the way, if you're listening to me talk about Jon Snow right now, and you know that Kit Harington played Jon Snow, go watch Industry season 4. and watch season 3 if you haven't already, because I'm telling you, Kit Harington has range. That's all I'm going to say. Kit Harington has range, and he's proving that on Industry, which is reinventing itself too. So we're covering that as well. Bankole and Ayo are going to be discussing it on Sunday nights, and I will be discussing it as well during the week with a roster of very interesting people. So definitely check that out too. We have a lot going on this podcast. But yeah, this is going to be a very fun journey. Like, I think it's going to be something spectacular. It's going to be something a little bit different. I can already see people being a little bit maybe miffed or disappointed about certain things, in terms of like, maybe it didn't have enough action, or it didn't have enough names that I recognize.
Battle scenes are probably going to be my big battle scenes are probably going to be my biggest concern. If you're looking for, big battle scenes, like say, Hard Home, or
like the very high budget stuff.
Yeah, like the very high budget, like massive battle scenes. I don't think this is going to have
that. Span half an episode or something.
Exactly. I don't think this is going to have that. It's going to have conflict. It's going to have violence. It's going to have blood. It's Westeros after all. But it's not going to have that. But that doesn't mean this isn't a story that is worth your time.
Yeah, because there's going to be some action. It just may not, because there's no war necessarily right now that we know of. It's probably not going to be anything like because in Game of Thrones, like literally they were at war most of that show. House of the Dragon is also literally about a war. This is the first, based on what we can see in the trailer, this seems like the first Game of Thrones show that is set in a time of peace, ostensibly. Relative peace. So like there will be action, but it will probably be in terms of like skirmishes, or the jousts that we see happening in the trailer and things like that, and
or
how they affect the people.
Interpersonal conflicts, you know.
Exactly. So I feel like that even has the potential to feel more interesting than a battle, because you get down to the nitty gritty of what is driving the people who are actually in the fights, because that's what makes fights interesting, right? The people behind them. It's not just because you're watching like an army of guys kill another army of guys. Like there has to be a motivation there. And I think because this is done on such a like smaller scale narrative, like production wise, they're like it's still bringing everything it can bring, but because it's done on a smaller scale narratively, it's like, okay, yeah, I think we've covered everything that we can look forward to in the show. So I guess, any final thoughts? Like, what else can people expect?
You can expect, for your heart to be, taken through the ringer on this show, as any GRRM production. You can expect really diving into Westeros. You can expect humor. You can expect, not like crazy world stakes, but high interpersonal stakes. And yeah, I think you can just expect a really good story. I'm going to be watching it. I hope you join me.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. This is going to be a fun journey, and I'm here for it because, what else am I going to be doing? Thank you all.
Popcorn for dinner.
I mean, hey, thank you. Exactly. Thank you all for listening up until this point. Thank you, Soonen, for joining me today. This has been amazing. Definitely tune in for our coverage of the show this Sunday. I guess this Sunday night, right after the episode drops, or by Monday morning, we're going to have our review out. And we're going to be breaking down everything that you see in the show, and we're going to be doing it on a weekly basis. So stay tuned, and welcome back to the gritty world of Westeros.